I had little choice of where I would go to college because I had to live at home, she said. NYU gave me a full scholarship. Barnard offered me only a very partial scholarship, but I was modeling and I knew I could make enough money to pay for my education, so I chose Barnard. When friends and family members read those words in a magazine profile in 1991, they were surprised. None of them was aware that Martha had ever been offered a full tuition scholarship. If she had, Eddie damn well would have demanded that she accept it, a relative commented. Eddie would have never let Martha turn down something like that. Hello, how are you? Welcome to my channel. My name is Cheer Denise. Today we're going to keep going in the Martha Stewart book, and we're going to be talking about her time dating, what she was like with boys, how boys perceived her. We're going to be getting into those last years of high school and then hopefully into the college years if we have enough time today. Martha's home life was really, really hard. Her parents were very austere people, sometimes verging on mean, sometimes cruel. We had a strange story last episode. If you didn't catch last episode, I would encourage you to go back and listen. There was this really strange story about the way that her mom dealt with one of her friends who she thought had transgressed. The friend went and wore an outfit that she was supposed to receive for Christmas before Christmas, so obviously the girl had wrecked her own Christmas. She took a present, wore the outfit to school because it was like the it outfit. Martha came home and told her mother, and then the mother took it upon herself to call that girl up, absolutely destroy her verbally, call her all kinds of names, and basically threaten the girl, if you don't tell your mom what you did, I will. And that is a wild thing for a mother to do. I have never heard of a mom doing that kind of a thing. So you can imagine a person like that who maybe felt bad that her daughter had come home and said so-and-so was wearing an outfit and it was understood that that outfit was kind of the it outfit, and maybe Mrs. Costira felt bad she couldn't get the same outfit for Martha, decided to take it out on this girl who shouldn't have wrecked her own Christmas, but that's kind of her problem, you know? And it was a very strange story, but it kind of gave an insight into the level of crazy that Martha was living with day to day. Martha's personality is very standoffish. She's not a warm person. I don't think anybody would describe her as that, even to this day. But you kind of realize that with the constant nitpicking from her dad, the constant anger, annoyance, and bitterness from him, and then the coldness of her mom, honestly, what kind of personality was she supposed to develop? But this chapter is really an interesting insight into her personality as far as other boys saw her, and as far as what she was like compared with other girls. So let's begin. This chapter is entitled High School Boys. While a number of her girlfriends were going steady, Martha seemed to have little interest in boys. Naturally, her pals had wondered why. With her good looks, they thought her date book should have been filled for months in advance. But it wasn't. Was Martha afraid of men? Did her relationship with her father negatively influence her feelings about the opposite sex? At the time, Martha's chums chalked up her indifference to her busy schedule. Later, they placed the blame on the father-daughter relationship and Costira family problems in general. Martha was very closed-mouthed about what went on at home, stated Nancy Teachman DeGroit, whose mother and Mrs. Costira were close friends. Martha kept a lot to herself. I don't know if anyone could really get real close to her. Once, when DeGroat overheard her own parents arguing, she became so upset that she sought Martha's guidance. I was absolutely devastated. I said, Martha, I think my parents are going to get a divorce. I've never heard them talk like this before. And I remember Martha saying very coolly, Nancy, don't worry about it. My parents fight and say things like that all the time. Lynn Sherwood Knaps said she was aware that Martha had problems with her father, as Frank Costira has already asserted. I'm always surprised when, on her TV shows or in odds and ends that I've read, Martha speaks lovingly of her father, she said. Instinctively, I knew that there was something wrong. As kids, we all had strict fathers. I always thought my father was the strictest, but maybe under it all, Martha's was the worst because we could talk about it, but she couldn't talk about it. And instinctively, we realized that there might be a problem there. She would never have said, my dad hit me, my dad kicked me, my dad hit my mom, because maybe it was something much more serious. Martha's seeming uninterest in boys didn't preclude the fact that she did on occasion go out with them, but they usually found her cold and intimidating. She didn't flirt and she didn't project a whole lot of personality, observed Knaps. She was too attractive, and she was too intelligent, and she was very cold, maintained handsome Anise Gertz Knaps, a member of Martha's class who later married Lynn Sherwood. "The guys didn't think much of Martha," asserted Gail Hellman Carmichael. "Having 3 brothers, I used to listen to them, and the guys on the football team talk when they came over to our house. They would laugh and call her a cold fish, and they would talk about her having no boobs, or whatever expressions they used." But Carmichael also remembered the evening Martha and a boy steamed up the Hellman's kitchen making out, breaking the ironing board Martha was leaning against while in passionate embrace. "The rest of the guys were kind of astonished that maybe she wasn't as cold as they thought," she said. Mark Hellman, one of Gail Carmichael's older brothers, was one of the few Nutley High School boys who actually dated Martha. Like her, he was among the school's elite. He was a president of the student council in senior year and a jock. Both were in a preppy clique and shared many of the same college-bound classes and extracurricular activities. Hellman also met Martha's standards for social acceptability. He was good-looking and came from a good family. His father was a banker, and the Hellmans lived in the best part of town. Plus, he was one of the few boys who owned a car, a '49 green Studebaker convertible, and Martha enjoyed being seen around town in it, even if it was only for an evening at Bolero and pizza afterward. "My folks loved Martha," remembered Hellman, who went on to earn degrees at Amherst and the University of Pennsylvania, and developed a successful practice as a veterinarian. To them, she was the ideal girl. She was intelligent, she was beautiful, she was well-mannered. They couldn't ask for more. But she wasn't real warm, so she wasn't a real desirable date as a romantic mate in those days. She had blonde hair and a cute face, but she didn't have a great figure. She was kind of a beanpole, skinny and no breasts. I didn't have great expectations when I went out with her. Back in those days, there were a few girls in the school where you could anticipate something more than making out a little bit and a goodnight kiss. You knew that at best you were going to kiss Martha a couple of times, maybe make out a little, but that was going to be as far as it would go. Martha was goal-oriented. She had a lot of drive. She wasn't about to get tied up in any kind of a relationship. Okay. Thanks, Hellman. I feel like everybody's devastation over the fact that she had no breasts. I mean, all right. Is she not more than that? I mean, I know, in high school, honestly, do boys think about more than that? Maybe not, but it seems like as an adult, you could be able to describe more efficiently why things didn't work out, but maybe it really was as simple as she didn't have a great figure, she was kind of beanpole where her boobs. I don't know. Anyway, the search for eligible young men sometimes took Martha and her pals far afield of Nutley. The Ivy League campus of Princeton University, about an hour south of town, for instance, was occasionally their hunting ground, especially on fall weekends when there was a football game, and Doreen Sawyer Skoke had her Ford. "We were not looking for academic boys," recalled Lynn Sherwood Knaps. "I don't think we looked at anybody and said, 'What's your grade point average?' We would go strictly to see what was available. The criteria were sophisticated, rich, good-looking." Martha immediately took to the waspy Princeton scene, a friend said. It fulfilled a fantasy for her, an escape from her poor roots, and she fitted in so well. Not long after her initial visit, Martha made it known to her friends that she had been invited to attend a weekend house party at the Princeton campus. It was supposed to be very glamorous, and we were all kind of envious that she was doing this sophisticated, glamorous thing, said a member of Martha's clique. Martha came back from the party with a glow. She said she had the most marvelous time ever. But the story that Martha put out for general consumption was different from what actually happened, said her pal. Once you're in college, once you've been to those house parties, you find out they're nothing more than drunken orgies. I don't think the party Martha went to was an orgy, but it wasn't sophisticated and wonderful like she expected, and like she said it was. I asked her, why don't you say what really happened? Why don't you tell the truth? And she finally admitted that she hadn't had a very good time, as she had first claimed. She said her mother had told her not to say she didn't have a good time. Why would her mother tell her that? Because Martha was doing something the rest of us hadn't done? Mrs. Kostira felt that if we were envious of her, we should remain envious. It's what I call revisionist history, just like her published memoirs about Nutley. It's what she wished had happened, as opposed to what did happen. What another interesting insight into Mrs. Kostira. She's a crazy person. I think Mrs. Kostira got tied down at the house with her 5 kids and her mean, demeaning husband and the huge workload. And I think that her little victories come to her through her children. I think she's living vicariously through the highs and lows that Martha experiences. And I think that's why she takes on these things in such a childish way. Why in the world would you call somebody about an outfit they wore to middle school? Like, lady, grow up. That's so not important. And why now, when Martha gets to go to this party, does she say to Martha, don't tell anybody you didn't have a good time. The girls should be envious of you. Like, how could Martha go through life with parents like this? Her dad a mean ogre and her mom as immature as it's possible to be. The book goes on. Martha's one hot romance during high school was with a transfer student from St. Benedict's in Newark, Peter Faribault, a 6'4", blue-eyed, square-jawed son of an obstetrician gynecologist. I would study, Faribault acknowledged in the Netley High School yearbook, but me oh my, these women drive me crazy. Peter likes girls, mostly Martha. The handsome, easygoing Faribault swept Martha off her feet, or she seduced him, depending on who was telling the story. Others suggested that Martha had lured Faribault away from her pal Doreen Sawyer-Skoke. They remembered that Doreen had been dating Faribault, and then when she went away for the summer, Martha had suddenly started seeing him. Martha kept things pretty much to herself, and if Peter and Martha did date, it was not being talked about because Doreen was our friend, said Lynn Sherwood-Knaps. If they were seeing each other, it would have been very much on the sly. That fall, a photo appeared in the Gauntlet of Martha and Faribault smiling and holding hands at the Miss Gauntlet of 1958 dance held in the Netley High Gymnasium. Martha's pal, Leanne White Ritchie, had been chosen as queen, and Martha was one of the 4 runners-up, which got a mention in the Gauntlet gossip column, Senior People. But, true to form, the relationship between Martha and Faribault ended rather abruptly. After about 5 months, they stopped dating. According to friends, Martha's father was behind the breakup. Weirdo, this dad of hers. He didn't like Faribault, they said. Nor, for that matter, did he like any other boy with whom she went out. Peter used to laugh about that, recalled Faribault's first wife, Peggy Milan Faribault, also a Netley High grad. Martha's father was rather strict, and Peter had to get her home on time. It'd be worth your life if you didn't get Martha home on time. All the boys used to laugh about how strict he was. They used to say they'd just slow down in front of the Costira house and tell Martha to jump out of the car because Mr. Costira would be waiting out front. It was the same no matter whom she went out with. Eddie Costira believed that a steady boyfriend would take away from Martha's pivotal senior year studies, her efforts to get into a good college, her need to win a scholarship, and her budding modeling career. He put his foot down, and Faribault was suddenly out of the picture. From what friends recall, there was no argument from Martha, whose goal was to get out of Netley and go into a good college. She thought Peter was cute and fun, but had nothing upstairs, said a member of her circle. Martha was much more sophisticated than Peter. She had bigger fish to fry. It was actually Peter Faribault's best friend, William Craig Carey, who probably benefited most from taking Martha out. Though he lived in Netley, Carey commuted daily to New York City, where he attended Xavier High School, an exclusive private Jesuit military academy. With the school's annual military ball scheduled for early in November 1958, he had decided that the girl he escorted should be a knockout and classy enough to be voted Queen of the Hop. From Faribault, Carey learned about the teenage model from Elm Place. Carey, who stood an inch or two shorter than the 5'9" Martha, took one look and told her she was a definite contender, and that he would submit her pictures to the school. If she won, she'd have to be his date for the evening. Weird times, friends. The ever-confident Martha, looking down at Carey, said, "Why not?" Carey, a shrewd go-getter who later became a lawyer, had picked a winner. Under the headline, Cadet Choice, the New York Journal-American on Sunday, November 9th, 1958, ran a photograph whose caption read, "An honor guardsman salutes with sword as Martha Costira, 17, of 86 Elm Place, Netley, New Jersey, escorted by Second Lieutenant William Carey, enters New York City Hall to invite Mayor Wagner to Xavier High School's military ball tomorrow night at the Hotel Statler. Martha will be crowned sweetheart of the Xavier Regiment." That was weird times back then when they just published your actual address. Like, what if somebody saw Martha in the paper and was like, "Oh, she is pretty cute. Don't mind if I do," and then just, showed up at her house? Martha, who basked in the publicity, added the clipping to her scrapbook, the kudo to her high school resume, and put the photograph, which showed her wearing a conservative suit, into her modeling portfolio. The next evening, Carey, a personable Irish-American with an ironic sense of humor, arrived to pick up Martha wearing several extra pairs of socks in hopes that it would make him look taller next to his willowy date. Martha made the dress she was wearing to the ball, and when Craig came to pick her up, I was upstairs hemming it like Cinderella, recalled Martha's cousin Diane Carey. That was the night I met Craig, who became my husband. He called me the following week to go out for a date. We got married 7 years later. I guess it never panned out between them. Interesting. Interessante, if I must say so. Coming to pick up your date and then, calling her cousin the next day, who was working like a little slave upstairs to hem that dress. Interesting times, my friends. Though Martha was a teenager during the golden age of rock and roll, the mid to late 50s, the music had little fascination for her. Unlike many of her classmates who were beboppers, some even making the pilgrimage to Philadelphia to dance on American Bandstand, Martha thought rock and roll was garbage, possibly because her father wouldn't permit her to play it at home. "Unlike my house," said Diane Carey, "I don't remember rock and roll being blasted at Martha's. My uncle played the violin, so he was trying to instill that into the kids." The other issue was money. Martha, who was socking away every cent she earned for college, wasn't about to shell out 89 cents for a 45 RPM record, the way her friends did. For Martha, the basic thing in high school was money, 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 Carey observed. She put it in the bank. She wasn't one to go out and blow money by any means. But Martha, always on top of popular trends, kept up on who was on the hit parade. And when she discovered that her pal, Doreen Sawyer Skoke, was a friend of Conchetta Francanero's brother, George, Martha shifted into high gear in hopes of meeting her through him. At the time, the Francanero girl, better known as Connie Francis, had a number of hit songs. Who's Sorry Now, Stupid Cupid, Fallen, and My Happiness. Connie, who was 20, was raking in the big bucks for herself. For the Francanero family of Belleville, a predominantly Italian enclave next to Nutley, and for MGM Records. Her money, her power, and her popularity impressed and fascinated Martha, and she was determined to get to know Connie Francis. It couldn't hurt. Martha decided that the best way to meet the singer was to become friends with her brother, so she decided to throw a party in his honor. She also arranged to have Doreen Sawyer Skoke put in a good word for her. The Sawyers and the Francaneros had summer homes at Lake Mohawk, a Tony, New Jersey vacation spot. Although Martha later became America's premier expert on entertaining, she had never thrown a real party at the Costera house during her high school years until the Connie Francis opportunity came along. Connie Francis's brother's presence was very important to Martha, Nancy Titchman DeGroat said. She was socially aware of that sort of thing even then, of being with the right people. Martha was very aware of social things. Martha tossed the bash when her father was out of town. Otherwise, he never would have permitted it. But the party apparently had little impact on the Francanero boy, who never introduced Martha to his famous sister. And without Connie Francis in the picture, Martha's interest in George Francanero quickly faded out, and the friendship ended. As one high school chum observed later, "I always got the impression that Martha only liked a guy if there was something in it for her." Now you guys know that I think the term narcissist is so overused it's lost all meaning, completely. But if one was to use that word and to delve into that annoying little world of, let's talk about who's a narcissist, I have to say that isn't that one of the abiding traits of the narcissist, that they just use everybody around them for their own ends? And Martha, I think, due to her pretty traumatic upbringing with such difficult parents, seems like she had to have the self-preservation that a narcissist seems to think they must have in order to get through life. Now, I don't know all the things about the narcissist, but her behavior from this point forward, and really, honestly, even leading up to this, but more and more markedly with every chapter we read, it is amazing how she uses people for her own ends. It is amazing how driven she is by her own goal and how she will use and abuse those in her path in order for herself to succeed. She's hugely self-consumed. And, just the fact that she's so annoyed by all her siblings. She didn't look at her siblings as sort of people with whom she could try to coexist in this really difficult home with her parents. Like, she didn't find solace in her siblings the way some kids do who have unhappy homes and whose parents are really hard to get along with. It makes the kids closer together. She just saw them as just more background noise and just, stumbling blocks in her way. And it seems like her friendships really were influenced by, how can you help me get to the next step that I have? I don't want to be your friend, but do you know somebody who I want to know? I'll hang out with you then. Or do you come from money so it makes me feel better to hang out with you? Because I'm poor from 86 Elm Street and I feel bad about myself. But your family has a vacation home in this, Tony suburb lake community. And maybe I'll, hitch my star to your wagon. It's a very, very weird way that she went through life from an early age. It does seem to be very driven by this sense of self-preservation. So I think this was created in her. I'm not necessarily saying that she came out of the womb like this, but the way that she's chosen to deal with life is very interesting to me. And it's only going to be more pronounced as we go on. All right, this next chapter about her high school years is called High Honors. By senior year, all of Martha's hard work and planning had been amply rewarded. Her hustling had combined to earn her at least partial scholarship money and admittance to Barnard, one of the nation's finest women's colleges. "I had little choice of where I would go to college because I had to live at home," she said. "NYU gave me a full scholarship. Barnard offered me only a very partial scholarship, but I was modeling and I knew I could make enough money to pay for my education, so I chose Barnard." When friends and family members read those words in a magazine profile in 1991, they were surprised. None of them was aware that Martha had ever been offered a full tuition scholarship. "If she had, Eddie damn well would have demanded that she accept it," a relative commented. Eddie would have never let Martha turn down something like that. The only scholarship that Martha was known to have won was a partial scholarship awarded by the Nutley Rotary Club. "Tribute 5 Rotary Scholars," declares the headline over a photo of Martha and 4 of her classmates on the front page of the Nutley Sun on June 25, 1959. The 5 Nutley High School Rotary Scholars were guests of the Nutley Rotary Club at its weekly luncheon last Thursday at Casa Capri, the caption reads. The photo shows a beaming Martha wearing a waist-length double-breasted plaid jacket, a faux pearl necklace, and a summery skirt. She was standing with class president Sandy Stoddard, bound for the U.S. Naval Academy, her close pals Ellie Watts, who chose Elmira College, and Barbara Viventi, who was off to Bryn Mawr with a $4,000 National Newark and Essex scholarship, and Martha's one-time boyfriend Mark Hellman, headed for Amherst. Each of the 5 received special Rotary medallions for scholarship and leadership at Nutley High School graduation exercises, with one of the quintet being awarded a $1,600 scholarship. The actual winner of the scholarship was not made known. Years later, Martha's uncle Hank Costera discovered a copy of that article among his family memorabilia. On the clipping, someone had written that the scholarship had been worth $400 a year to his niece. I just want to say real quick, just because Eddie didn't know about the scholarship to NYU doesn't mean it didn't happen. Now, Martha says it did happen. And her tenuous relationship with the truth would make one think that potentially she'd made it up for the interview in 1991 to make it seem like, she was just, of course she was wanted over there, but she had higher aspirations and was going to make it work for herself because that's the sort of story she likes to tell about herself. But I also think that somebody like Martha, at this stage of her life, having sort of had to play cat and mouse with her dad for so long, him sort of breathing down her neck constantly, would have created an environment in which lying was the way to get ahead with her dad. Like, don't tell him the truth, because he's going to try to manipulate you. And I'm sure that there was a part of her that got freedom by being secretive with him. So I think both scenarios are equally possible, that she potentially lied in the interview in 1991 about the full scholarship to NYU. But I think it's equally possible that she did receive the scholarship and didn't tell him because she didn't want to go there. Barnard seemed better to her. And it was really more how she saw herself and how she wanted to make herself in that college's image. I think Martha was probably a highly secretive child, especially by this point, because, she's about to leave for home. And to some extent, she had quite a bit of freedom as far as she was sent off to New York to interview for modeling jobs. Her parents nowhere in sight. And I think that there would have been plenty of freedom to sort of navigate what she wanted out of life without her dad knowing what it was that she was after. Play his game so that he thinks that she's still in with him, but meanwhile kind of doing her own thing on the side. Martha was overjoyed at the prospect of going to Barnard. In Ellie Watts Flavin's yearbook, Martha wrote triumphantly, "Dear Ellie, I've just been accepted to Barnard, and Barnard, here I come." Recalled Flavin, it was real excitement in her, and I know that there had to have been some concern about payment for tuition because that was not a cheap school. Barnard was her first choice, and it also was one of those late admission things, like a mid-April kind of thing, so it was a matter of her hanging on and hoping that it would happen. Stairway to the Stars was the theme of the class of '59 senior prom, and the prom committee had huge plans to transform the smelly gym into what the Maroon and Gray, the school newspaper, described as a silvery summer night, a fairyland of billowy clouds and twinkling lights. The Souvenirs, a 9-piece orchestra, had been hired, and lucky couples were being offered door prizes that included 2 pig dinners at Bond's. The girls had been preparing for prom for months, all of them, except Martha. Once again, she was without a date, this time for the most important social event of her high school career. When Lynn Sherwood Knapp's learned of Martha's fix, she set to work arranging a date for her with Peter Lincoln, the school's lanky, bashful film projector operator, a member of the Rifle Club, a big fan of TV's Maverick, and a swimmer. Like Martha, Peter Lincoln didn't date anybody, said Kneps, so I fixed them up. I was a manipulator behind it because Peter was painfully shy. It got to be a challenge to get Peter Lincoln to even talk to you. Somehow or other I convinced him that he had to go to the prom, and that Martha would like to go with him. And I told Martha the same thing. I pulled off some stunt like that. Once Martha agreed, she set about making her own prom dress from a Vogue pattern. All the girls were wearing pastel gowns, but Martha used a rich brown fabric. She wanted to stand out, observed Diane Carey. She wanted to be different. Martha was graduated at the top 10% of her class. Her only award, despite all her activities and high grades, was high honors in English, based on her having had all A's in the subject. Her yearbook picture made her look like Doris Day. Marty, as some people like to call her, likes reading, eating, English, and swimming. Would like to see Darkest Africa. And when she hears Somebody Loves Me, she says, "Ooh," the caption said. Those old yearbook captions never made a whole lot of sense to me. Martha's personal inscription confidently declared, "I do what I please, and I do it with ease." Martha. Okay. Last chapter for us today is entitled Barnard, Bermudas, and Glamour. My best friend during my freshman year at Barnard College was Wendy Supavitz, Martha wrote in her magazine. Her family lived in Shaker Heights, Ohio, and whenever her parents came to New York to visit her, they took us to Trader Vic's for drinks and dinner. It was then, in 1960, that I was introduced to the pleasures of Polynesian cuisine. Martha was using the remembering column in Martha Stewart Living as a segue for colloquies about various subjects having to do with the cosmic product of lifestyle. Foreign Affairs was the title of the piece that mentioned Miss Supavitz, an essay not about Martha's first-year social life at Barnard, but rather about her early experimentation with exotic foods. When Wendy Riley, née Supavitz, read that particular column in Martha's magazine, her first reaction was one of euphoria. Out of the blue, there she was, her name unexpectedly appearing in one of America's most popular magazines and linked to one of America's most extraordinarily successful women. It was really exciting, she said later. I couldn't believe it. And then after rereading the brief mention, she shook her head and thought, Shaker Heights? What? And burst out laughing. A residential suburb of Cleveland, Shaker Heights is one of the most affluent communities in the country, a place that would make a perfect backdrop for a Martha Stewart layout. But Wendy Supavitz Riley wasn't a Shaker Heights girl. Martha knows I'm from Steubenville, she said. I guess Shaker Heights looked and sounded better to her than Steubenville. If you know anything about Steubenville, Shaker Heights is a bit of a step up, to say the least. Riley said it was true that on social occasions the Supavitzes had visited New York and had taken her and a few of her college chums to dinner. We could go to any restaurant we wanted, Pavilion, for example, but I don't remember ever going with my parents to Trader Vic's. And I don't remember that we ever took Martha there. The daughter of a well-to-do businessman and Martha became instant friends during freshman orientation in September 1959. Martha was tall and blonde, and I was tall and blonde, Riley said. It wasn't real deep, but that's what brought us together. Martha began college at dawn of one of the most tumultuous decades in America's history, a montage of momentous and minor events, one replacing the other so quickly that they all seemed to swirl together like images in a kaleidoscope. The Civil Rights Movement, the space race, the Cuban Missile Crisis, Elvis and Marilyn and Charles Van Doren, the twist, Vietnam, the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Barnard was a highly politicized school. As early as Martha's freshman year, classmates were joining peace marches or traveling south to protest segregation. But Martha was no activist, and the Costairas were not liberals, though they did support Kennedy. The Civil Rights Movement was as invisible to Martha as black people were in Netley, a mostly white community, with African Americans relegated to the ghettos of nearby Newark. Martha never had a black friend, never knew any blacks until she entered Netley High, where there was only a few. In her graduating class, there were 4 African Americans, and the yearbook showed them in a stereotypical light. One girl, quote, says goodness and hopes to own a Cadillac. Another's ambition was, quote, to graduate, and a third, quote, likes dancing and Chuck Berry. The most popular black in Martha's class was Clinton A. Taylor, a star athlete, known affectionately as Goose, whose favorite phrase was, you betch'em. One yearbook photo showed an unidentified white boy standing with his arm around Taylor, whose face and hair were covered with what appeared to be whipped cream. Taste good, Clint? The caption asked. Martha's world always was white. Her many books, her magazine, and her TV shows ignored the tastes and lifestyles of even the most upscale Black Americans, a fact that was underscored somewhat embarrassingly by Martha during a December 1995 appearance on Larry King Live. Asked by a caller whether she had any holiday decorating tips for Kwanzaa, Martha asked, "What's Kwanzaa?" While Martha didn't march for equality in Alabama or Mississippi or hand out ban the bomb flyers in Washington Square, she did become enmeshed in one campus political controversy known as the Bermuda Shorts ban. It all started in the spring semester of Martha's freshman year, when Barnard president Millicent McIntosh, despite her staunch feminist views, established a dress code, still referred to years later in the Barnard Alumni magazine as the dress code horror. McIntosh caused a furor among a certain faction of the student body, mainly Martha's preppy crowd, when she ordered the Bermudas, which were highly popular at more traditional Seven Sisters schools like Smith and Vassar, could not be worn on her sophisticated Manhattan campus. The ban became a cause célèbre when the New York Times and the Herald Tribune ran prominent page-one stories. Reporters and photographers were all over the country descending on the college. Enter Martha Kostyra, her pal Wendy Supovitz Riley, and an unidentified Japanese young woman wearing a traditional kimono and clogs. Martha and Wendy were looking très preppy in their band Bermudas, button-down Oxford cloth shirts and white sneakers as they stood talking to the Japanese woman. A news photographer covering the fuss shot the tableau, and Martha's picture appeared in newspapers around the country. Martha and I were totally unaware of President McIntosh's proposal, Riley swore. We weren't wearing our Bermudas as part of any protest. Actually, we'd been off campus shopping for new Bermudas the day that photo was taken. We just didn't know we weren't supposed to be wearing them. What really angered Martha most about the whole controversy, though, was not the rights issues raised, but rather the angle of the photo of her that appeared in the New York Daily News and other newspapers across the country. The camera was to Martha's back, Riley said. Martha was furious because the picture showed my face and not hers. An art history major, Martha seemed undaunted by the heavy academic load and intellectual demands that Barnard placed on her. She had no choice but to be on the 5-course system, which meant that she had to take a minimum of 5 subjects per semester, equal to 15 credits or more. Competition was keen, and the professors rarely gave out A's. But Martha was used to working hard. However, unlike her high-profile status at Nutley High, she was now lost in the crowd, a small fish in a big sea of many extremely bright, driven, ambitious, and attractive women. The heavy hitters, the two who became the best known of the class of '63, at least until Martha Kostyra reinvented herself as the Martha Stewart, were a talented dancer, Twyla Tharp, and an ambitious writer, Erica Mann. Years later, Martha and Mann, better known as Erica Zhang, were antagonists in a private feud of potentially explosive and scandalous proportions. Students who lived in the dorms kept their lights burning, studying late into the night, rarely leaving campus, the academic pressures being so great. They often arrived at early morning classes wearing night clothes under their raincoats, having studied right up until the last minute. But Martha was placing even greater physical and emotional demands on herself as a commuter, working her way through school. Her daily grind often began before dawn, when she boarded the bus in Nutley, bound for the Port Authority terminal in Times Square, where she jumped into the crowded subway to campus at Broadway and 116th Street. The trip often took 2 hours, time she used to study. After classes, and sometimes in between, she worked squirreling away every penny to supplement her scholarship. "I lived home my first year and commuted. I had so many jobs," she said. "I modeled. I worked in Bamberg's in Newark selling chocolates at Christmas." Recalled a classmate, Caroline Fleischer Birnenbaum, who became active in the art world. Martha's life wasn't glamorous, even with the modeling. The modeling was a grueling piece of work that she had to squeeze in before she did her homework. When she went out on modeling interviews, I'd see her racing off campus wearing a beautiful gray coat dress that she had made herself. It was a hectic life. Sometimes the pace became too much, and Martha would crash on the floor in Wendy Supovitz Riley's dorm room in Hewitt Hall. But usually she required little sleep, had infinite energy, and seemed to thrive on the stress, even volunteering to help design costumes for Barnard's annual Greek Games, a weekend festival of artistic and athletic events. Martha was very knowledgeable about the sewing and the construction of costumes, and we tried to design and make a historically accurate costume by doing research, said Marlene Lobel-Ruthin, an American history major who commuted from Yonkers. When we didn't win the costume designing award, Martha was very disappointed. She felt the judges didn't appreciate our design. Next to her classes, though, Martha's focus remained on her modeling career. She'd started getting jobs at Bendel's and Bergdorf's, and her face was showing up frequently in magazines. For a very short time, she was a Ford model. In order to go out on interviews, Martha often resorted to borrowing clothing from friends because her wardrobe was still nearly bare. Martha didn't have a lot, so she borrowed mine, said Wendy Supovitz Riley, whose dorm closet was bursting with expensive things from Saks and Bonwitz. She'd say, "Let me take this, let me take that," and she went in and she took them. My clothing even showed up in a number of magazine layouts. After she won the Glamour thing, the French magazine Marie Claire did a profile on her, and she wore my outfits in the layout too. The Glamour thing was a major milestone in Martha's modeling career. Every fall, Glamour magazine selected the 10 best-dressed college girls in America. Martha, ever confident, felt she had a shot at being chosen, so she sent in her application, attaching photos of herself wearing borrowed, dressy, casual, and business outfits. The formal announcement of her selection appeared in Glamour's big back-to-school issue. "It's a grand new flag," declared the headline over Glamour's sappy text. "There is, suddenly, nothing old under the sun. Art, science, politics, in each we have tried to imagine the unimaginable new frontiers that will be met and crossed by today's college girls in tomorrow's world. Things no longer mean what they used to mean. All at once, they mean far less. Or infinitely more. That's why, with little or no apology to Blueberry Pie, we first photographed the 10 young girls you meet on the next pages, Glamour's best-dressed college girls of 1961, with the star-spangled space sign of freedom, the newly meaningful, soberly magnificent, freshly waving American flag. Now, one by one, the winners." A full-page photograph showed a pert Martha wearing an A-line coat, gloves, and medium heels, and carrying an alligator handbag. The layout described her as a young woman of tenderness and vitality. An expressive face, both shy and sure, a flicker of fun in her eyes and mouth. Life pleases her. In particularly a young man named Andy. Art and architecture, heroes, composer Bartók, Churchill, playwrights, Christopher Fry. She cooks, too. She wears Tiger Brights, orange tropical extract. Here in a fluffy coat, first semi-fitted, then flared. In front a waist and sheared, in back no waist and smooth. Scarf, paisley print. Who can even follow this? I don't understand this. Who was in charge of writing this? What is this line here in the intro to the whole thing? Things no longer mean what they used to mean. All at once, they mean far less. Or infinitely more. What are you trying to say? Barbara Stone, Glamour's model editor at the time, later Martha's agent, said the magazine's contest was a very big deal in those days. It was something young college girls really vied to get in. Colleges all over the country were hoping to be selected. Girls were hoping to be chosen. But not every girl had actually been modeling like Martha. She was ahead of the game when she entered the contest. The women's chaperone that year was a stunner. Tall and slim as a sapling with streaky brown hair and level blue eyes, was the way Glamour described just-married Norma Collier, one of 1960's 10 best-dressed college girls, a cum laude, and Pi Beta Kappa from Wilson College, a small Presbyterian school in Pennsylvania. Martha was excited about having won, Collier recalled. She liked the opportunity. But she was certainly not starry-eyed about it. Martha and Norma were to have a close relationship that lasted for decades. "We became very good friends right away," she said. "Martha was the godmother of my children, and I was her daughter's godmother. We had keys to each other's houses. We spent holidays together. We were very close, like family." But over the years, Norma Collier was a prime-time player in the many private dramas in Martha's life. She also was one of the many friends and associates who fell victim to Martha's increasingly rapacious, calculating, manipulative, exploitative, and sometimes frightening behavior. You guys, I saw somebody in the comments the other day say, this book's okay, but it doesn't hold a candle to the one about Mrs. Kennedy. Just wait. Because, we got to set the stage. We got to set the scene. We got to introduce all these various people who are later going to be brought up, because Martha's going to run over these people with a steamroller. She will use anybody who thought they had a real relationship with her. In the end, she will use and abuse them if it means that she gets to climb up one more rung. It is astounding to me where this story goes. So if you are like, all right, okay, hold on. Wait it out with me. Because I read ahead. Martha's crazy. And what's particularly crazy to me is her utter inability to see any of her faults. And this is what I'm saying to you. I don't know about the term narcissist, but I know about the term selfish. And she is the most self-centered, self-involved, self-protective human being I think I've ever read about. She loves nobody, not even the fruit of her own loins. The way she's going to treat her daughter Lexi from the minute that child is in this world will blow your socks off. So if you're like, this book's kind of slow, it's going to pick up, okay? So I promise you that Oppenheimer is not going to abandon us. He brings the goods. And I have to say, I haven't been able to put this book down. Anyway, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I look forward to reading the rest of this book with you, and I will see you later this week. Bye.